All right. So we've come to the end of time. So let's go ahead and start the reading. And it looks like Lucy is going to go first. Um, that's funny. Um, okay, so let's hear from Lucy. And if anyone else decides that they want to read in between now and the end, then we're happy to add names as we go along. All right, let's go ahead and start.
Okay, so I'll just go. Lily, can I have a cookie? Asked Joseph, a kid in her class. Oh, well, I don't know. They might have nuts in them or something, she replied shakily. That's fine. I'm not allergic. Oh, I thought you were. Weren't you saying the other day that you were allergic to something? Well, I'm lactose intolerant, if that's what you're thinking of. Oh, yeah, maybe. Well, I should, probably go to lunch. We're like 3 feet away from the cafeteria, Joseph said, confused. Lily forced a laugh. Oh, yeah. Weren't we talking about something else a second ago? Lily looked at him strangely. Were we? Joseph nodded. Yeah, cookies. So can I have one? Well, they might have, and maybe my friends, and what would. Well, I guess so. Lily sat between Grace and Sheila at lunch, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. So, Grace said, and one could hear the smile in her words, I noticed that you gave a certain cookie to a certain person. They weren't certain cookies, and he's not a certain person. He just asked for one, and I gave him one, Lily replied heatedly. Then what were you talking to Joseph about for way more time than him asking you for a cookie? Sheila said. Stammered Lily. The weather? Nothing else, Grace said skeptically. The weather, Sheila said, barely smothering her laugh. Nothing else. Hey, Lily, a voice called from across the sidewalk. She looked up and saw none other than Joseph. Hi, what are you doing here? Well, I go to school here and I need to walk home. So, right, walking home from school. Anyways, I just wanted to say that those cookies were great and I'll eat more if you ever bring in more. Oh, and Brian and some of the other soccer players want some too. Lily nodded. Oh, yeah, I can make more sometime, maybe if you like or want something. You're the best. Joseph walked away while Lily just stood there watching.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Lucy. It was wonderful. So there are a couple things I really like about that work, but the first thing I wanted to do was just kind of acknowledge how you incorporated some of the technical elements from the presentation into your own writing, how you used the kind of the colloquial kinds of language in your dialogue that we saw in many examples presented to us in the various slides, how you use kind of hesitation, how you employ methods of uncertainty and lying in some cases. Independently of all that, though, was how you use the technique of ambiguity in the dialogue. So what we see when we open the scene is Joseph asking Lily for a cookie and Lily very clearly not wanting to give him one. But what we don't understand is why she doesn't want to give him one. It seems to us initially that she doesn't want to give him a cookie because she wants the cookies for herself. This is the very easy, almost ready-made interpretation of the dialogue. It turns out, though, that it seems she doesn't want to give him a cookie because maybe she likes him and is afraid that by giving him the cookie, she will demonstrate some kind of secret desire for him, some kind of that the cookie is a kind of emblem for her own crush, something like that. Uh, we'd have to see what would happen on the walk home to know if that's the case. But there is some unspoken relationship between Lily and Joseph that is only hinted at in the dialogue. So that's kind of the irony of the piece that you just shared with us, is that although most of it is comprised of dialogue, characters speaking to each other, there still remains some major thing that is not being said um, by Lily or Joseph, at least. And we see this with the moment with the certain cookies and the certain person. Um, so there's this really kind of wonderful play that's going on between what is said and what is unsaid or what is hidden and it was really wonderful. I thought that was pretty masterful, actually. It's a great job.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Um, Next up is Jackson.
So I actually continued off of that first thing where like the two men talk who hate each other talking about the weather. Or not two men, but two people talking about the weather. I just want two old men because I don't know. Two old men sat on opposite sides of a worn out deck. They rocked back and forth, the old screen above barely protecting them from the pitter patter of the rain. The first man tried to get up, but let out a loud grunt of submission when and fell back into the chair. Ha, the second man said in a thick Scottish accent. You're just as wilted and torn as that thing'll be after the storm. He stated this last part at the same time as pointing a gnarled finger at the small paper airplane, lonely sitting atop a storm drain, wings already beginning to collapse in on themselves. Well, at least a storm makes some things happen, unlike some other things I know. Just sitting around all day without any kind of purpose. The man spoke swiftly and confidently, like a sniper taking precise shot after precise shot. The second man said, not having to come back. He simply folded his stubborn arms over his chest. He said, finally finding his voice. So dark and gloomy. He pointed at the sky above, even in the middle of the day. Why not let the sun in? He gave the first man a pointed glance, barely hiding what he was actually saying. The first man rolled his eyes. Because it's a storm and they're dark, sun isn't supposed to come through. Ah, the second man said, nodding and sitting back in his chair, giving the first man a wink that was completely unnecessary. Wind from the growing storm above blew into both of their faces, as if telling them to stop bickering over. That's all I got. Couldn't finish that sentence. Didn't finish the sentence.
That's great. Okay, so yeah, this is going to give me an opportunity to say some things that I usually tell my students when I try to teach dialogue. The first thing is that I think dialogue is oftentimes most effective when the characters are doing something other than talking to each other, so that the characters are both engaged in conversation and also engaging their bodies or their eyes or their hands or something like this. So that they're doing two things at once. They're talking and they're also, in this case, looking out at the weather. They're engaging with the weather even in various ways, or the weather is engaging with them at least. And that doesn't just happen in the last line of the piece you just shared with us. It happens pretty regularly throughout. The other thing that I try to tell students about writing dialogue is that you almost always want your characters to be talking about two things simultaneously. And that happened in Lucy's piece as well. The characters seem only to be talking about cookies, but also underneath the surface, they are talking about their own kind of secret feelings for one another. So that the cookie is really just a stand-in for saying other things. There is, in other words, a transference or a projection of feelings onto the object of dialogue. In the case of Lucy's piece, that would be the cookie. In the case of your piece, Jackson, that would be the weather. So the men, in other words, are talking about two things at once. They're talking about the weather, but they're also talking about their own feelings for each other, which in the case of your piece is kind of antagonistic. Whereas in Lucy's, it was maybe more affectionate or playful. So yeah, you also do a really great job. This is kind of independent of your dialogue, but you do a very good job of having the old men reflected in the atmosphere or the setting, so that the setting, the weather, almost registers the kind of internal landscape of the characters, the worn out deck and the storm. There's a kind of anger in the storm, or at least an intensity that exists in the outside world that, as I say, registers the relationship between the men, and perhaps even the kind of psychological states of mind that both of them occupy. So the outside world, in other words, is reflective of the inside world, reflective also of the relationship. So yeah, it's really great. Thank you for sharing. Oh, great. And I think maybe we should let Anya and Madeline say a few things as well.
Yeah, I really, really liked how you used an accent as well. Your Scottish accent's pretty good. And I liked how it kind of differentiated the two characters, so like you could tell who was talking. That was a really nice touch.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree with everything Connor said. And I think like Connor said too, how you mixed in the dialogue with the actions and the setting. I thought that really made it very complete. I really liked that.
Yeah, thank you, Jackson. So next up is Liam.
Okay, so this piece doesn't have a name yet, and kind of like last time, I think I just mostly used the prompt as inspiration and didn't necessarily follow it very well. But here it goes. I knew I wasn't welcome here. I didn't fish, and I didn't own a boat, and I didn't have enough spare change to cover the price of the ferry ride across Niles Gulf. Outsiders like me should have been completely lost the second they swerved off of the highway, following signs for Fog Bay next exit, and willing their broken down cars to last until the next gas station. Outsiders should have taken one look at the crumpled, exhausted old shanties, called up the local towing company, and hightailed it out of there as fast as their feet could take them. And trust me, I would have escaped from Fog Bay the moment I'd laid my eyes upon it, if I didn't have business to attend to. As I threaded through town, though, suddenly conscious of the van's guttural, clanking engine echoing off of the graffitied walls, I knew I had no choice. This was the place, no doubt about it. Now, the only question was how I was supposed to reach my dealer without getting mugged, murdered, kidnapped, or all of the above. I slowly crept around a dilapidated street corner, my tires hesitantly shuddering over the chipped asphalt. Seabright Avenue. An old woman with raisin brown skin and deep wrinkles glowered disapprovingly at me, stashing a floral patterned umbrella between her frail little fingers. Her squinting eyes were hidden behind round and golden reading glasses, but even through the crystalline reflection of the clouds and rust and choppy waves, I could sense her burning hatred. There was an empty spot narrowly wedged between two sea-weary pickups, piled high with cages of live, squirming lobster and fish. Seabright Avenue was completely abandoned, devoid of life, even when compared to the rest of dreadful Fog Bay, lined with cement gray warehouses and stockyards of dismantled fishing boats. Pocketing my keys, I tried to imagine the SS Maryland on its maiden voyage, however long ago that may have been, before its bottom was drilled out and the rest of the ship was put on blocks to gather rust and death. She wouldn't have been a bad cargo vessel, I thought. She was well beyond any respectable state of repair now, but if I'd had the mind to brave the drive out here years ago, to face my past for what it was, I could have spared her. I could have fixed her up and gone about cruising along the coast, living off of seaweed and crab and rainwater, and I'd have chucked all these memories back into the ocean where they'd come from. By the time I finally reached the corner of Seabright and Maine, the weathered old woman was long gone, disappeared behind one of the bleached garage doors or down onto the docks, maybe to board a ship and steer herself far, far away from here, as far as she could go before the fuel ran out and the starboard side was tipping into the churning gray water. I stared off into the storm-ridden horizon for a moment, wondering if what I saw reflected off of my own eyes the way they'd reflected off of hers, before some feeling returned it to my feet, and I quickly rushed inland, shunning the cold and merciless Atlantic over my shoulder.
Great, thanks. That was wonderful, Liam. So I have some Well, let's start with Madeline and Anya, and then I'll say my comments. I have written down many things, as you can see.
Yeah, I don't know, I really liked that. I think that you definitely, I can see maybe translating, you really give your writing a sense of character, and you give the setting a sense of character, which I think translates similar to what we were talking about with dialogue, also giving people a sense of character. So I could see that translating across, and I really liked that. It was great.
Yeah, I really liked how like with the old lady and the main character, like there wasn't an exchange of dialogue. And I almost feel like the absence of dialogue there actually probably said more than if there was dialogue there. Like how you could kind of tell that she hated him. Like, yeah, I think that was really cool how you didn't need to put dialogue there. But it's still like you could still tell, and it still spoke about who she was and like how she interpreted who the main character was.
Cool. Yeah, that's great, Madeline. So usually the place I like to begin commentating from is the course theme, or the theme of the day. So now I'm listening to you read, Liam, and I'm waiting for the dialogue to come in. And I'm thinking, when is the dialogue going to happen? And the dialogue never happens, as Madeline mentioned. So there is no dialogue in that work, and I'm wondering how it's working in terms of dialogue without the literal presence of dialogue on the page. So what Madeline mentioned also kind of occurred to me, that there's this unspoken dialogue between two characters, the narrator and the older woman. The dialogue exists in glances, in body language, in a kind of imagery, but there's also a dialogue that's going on between the narrator and himself, where the narrator is projecting his imagination into some speculative future or into some remembered past. This happens at least twice in the story, where there's a kind of dialogue that's going on with the urban landscape, the kind of dilapidated shipyards. So there's this weird dialogue going on between the observations of the narrator and how those observations then transform themselves into remembrances, or at the end of the story, into some kind of horrific future. So I thought that was very interesting, and also very surprising twist on today's theme of dialogue, to think about dialogue with oneself, or dialogue between external and internal, between literal and figurative, between image and psychology. So it was really, that was yeah, that was wonderful, very surprising. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Wrapping things up for today is Senna.
Okay. Come on, we're going to be late. Okay, I'm coming. Just let me finish the chapter. No, you can't. You have to come right now. Otherwise, I'll miss the first part. It's just your stupid dancing rehearsal. It's not like a job interview or anything. It's not stupid. And at least I have the courtesy to not make you late to one of your play dates with your weird friends. They aren't play dates. We just go to the park and hang out. And they aren't that weird. Sounds like a play date to me. And what do you mean they aren't weird? You spend all your time talking about how weird they are. That's different. I mean it in a good way. Whatever. Hurry up. Okay. They get in the car. Quit humming. You sound like a broken car. My sister, the comedian. Whatever. 2 minutes later. Quit humming. Well, you stop bickering. Stop humming. I don't want to hear another sound for the rest of the drive. Okay, Dad. And that's as far as I got.
Great. I just want to make sure that there wasn't any more. That's okay, that's great. And that also it provides me with an opportunity to say something that I always want to talk about when it comes to dialogue, and something I thought you did very well, even though it wasn't directly addressed today. And that was your use of dialogue tags. So a dialogue tag is when in a text you see the phrase he said, she said, they said, etc. Any time that the narrator ascribes a speech act to a specific character, that's called a dialogue tag. And usually I tell my students to use as few dialogue tags as possible, to just trust the reader to follow the line of dialogue without the need to be told who is speaking all the time. And a really good writer can write voices so distinctive one from another that the reader will know who is speaking without having to be told he said or she said, etc. So you, I thought, did a really good job of omitting dialogue tags. There's almost no exposition in your writing, almost no description. It's almost all dialogue, and without those dialogue tags, it feels very quick, very intense. And you have there's one moment where in between the two sets of dialogue, so there's the dialogue where one character is late, the other character is trying to finish a chapter, and then there's this little transitional phrase that is, they get in the car. So between two sections of dialogue, they get in the car. That's only description, really the only kind of expository writerly moment that we have, and otherwise it's all dialogue. I also thought it was pretty great how you used humming in place of any kind of substantive argument, because it did a really good job of showing us the relationships between the characters and the personalities of the characters. So we don't need any kind of concrete material to have the characters argue with each other, because one of them is annoyingly humming. And it creates a kind of almost an empty conflict between the characters. So I thought it was very original. It was great. Thanks for reading, Senna.
Thanks.
Anya or Madeline, do you have something to say?
Yeah, sure. So I also want to mention how you read it. I really, really liked the way you read it out loud. It was almost like a performance. Like you could really tell who was saying what. And the humming was a very nice touch as well. I liked how you did that. And it made it very obvious. So like this person isn't humming nicely, they're doing it to annoy the other person. So I thought that was a really great touch.
Yeah, I thought the dialogue was very descriptive, and I really did like how you could tell who was saying all of the lines even without the dialogue tags. And it did feel very real and very genuine, like two people, maybe two siblings would have if they're fighting over something like this. So that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Senna. So now actually wrapping things up for today. Sorry about that, Emma. Will be Emma.
Okay, I drew a good picture today. You want to see? I asked. I heard that if you cut off a chicken's head, it'll keep running. That true? Asked Uncle Morris, chewing on a cigarette. Why are you asking me? And anyways, what does that have to do with art? Know it or not? I don't. It's true. What's the point of this? The point of this, Robin, is because I'm trying to tell you that silly pictures don't matter. Silly pictures won't make you a living. Artists make money. Not with silly pictures. Not with silly, childish pictures. I'm not a grown-up yet. I'll get better as I grow. Anyways, you haven't even seen the picture. It of a chicken? No. It of a cow? Stop playing around, Uncle Morris. I ain't playing, Robin. Then what are you doing? I'm here to take care of you. You know that, Robin. Your parents said if something ever happened to them, I gotta take care of you. Something happened. You've been on this farm for months, and you still don't understand that you gotta be a farmer. Everything else, too dangerous. I want to keep an eye on you. I don't want you to die like your parents did. I'm not going to. How do you know? I just do. Drawing isn't dangerous. Loving doing what you love to do isn't dangerous. Robin, let me tell you a story about your parents. I don't want to hear it. Have it your way. Uncle Morris, don't you understand? Being a farmer, it may not be dangerous, but no one likes farmers. No one I know, anyways. The kids at school call me Pork because of how I hang out with the pigs and draw them. Don't listen to them, kids. They don't know anything. You, however, need to know that you are a farmer, through and through. But I'm not. I love animals, but I don't like butchering them. Heck, I'm a vegetarian. I don't want to work in fields all day. I want to draw nature, but not harvest it. Lazy girl. I'm not lazy, I just like drawing. Don't you understand? I don't. Not at all. But I'll agree with you for now. So that's where it ends. I just wanted to say that some of the stuff here, like how nobody at her school likes farmers and how her uncle doesn't like artists. I don't think that. It's just for the story, so I don't want it to be offensive to anybody.
That was great. That's really great. So let's start with Madeline and Anya this time.
Yeah, so I really liked that. And I really liked how you could really tell what the two characters thought of each other, and you could really tell that they were arguing. I also thought that you could definitely tell that the second character was a kid just by the way that they were refuting her uncle's argument, that it just felt it didn't feel childish. That's not the right term, but it felt like it was coming from a kid who's just very insistent on making this point that she thinks should be made. And I also did like how the uncle was saying things like ain't, and he was talking more colloquially, because that definitely helps to enhance his character.
Yeah, I agree with what Anya said. You wrote through the perspective of the adult, or like what the adult was saying, very, very well. I mean, I often find myself having conversations with adults where they're like, just kind of like, yeah, sure, nope, we're gonna do this, not that. Like they're rather dismissive of like what you want to say, and I think you really captured that nicely.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. So as wonderful. There are two lines that are just amazing. It of a chicken, it of a cow. Amazing. It's outstanding dialogue because it's not just that. So yeah, you want your dialogue to be realistic, but you don't want it to be too realistic, because dialogue that's too realistic can converge on boring. Because if you just go to a restaurant or a cafe and listen to ordinary people talking to each other, it's very seldom interesting to listen to, and it's full of ums and hesitations and, well, I mean, I like, I feel like so I think you also want to have your dialogue not only to be realistic, but to have a certain kind of poetry about it. And the lines "it of a chicken, it of a cow" absolutely achieves both the kind of sense of realism and also the strange kind of music, this writerly music that was really impressive, I thought. The dialogue is impressive. It's impressive for the reasons that Anya and Madeline have already mentioned. It's impressive because it's not only realistic, it's also poetic. But I also wanted to say that the topic of conversation is pretty interesting, I think, and also very serious. So even though the dialogue, it has a kind of lightness about it. We were talking about lightness last week. It has a kind of lightness about it. There's definitely a casual rapport between the characters involved. But the topic of conversation is also a major, serious philosophical question, which is the value of art, the value of pursuing what one loves, especially in the face of something as practical and necessary as farming. So to juxtapose a farmer with a would-be artist is it's very interesting. I think it's very moving, and it's deep. It feels kind of emotionally and philosophically important. So I think it's great. Thank you for sharing it. It of a
Thanks.
chicken. I'll never forget it. It of a chicken. No. It of a cow. And of course he's asking, is it of a chicken or a cow, because he's surrounded by farm animals, and because presumably she's been drawing animals, which we do find out later. Well, I mean, just one more thing before I finish. The other thing that's really interesting is how you withhold in this story as well, because we find out that there are pictures of animals. He asks her, it of a chicken, it of a cow, before we know that they're on a farm. So it seems very strange. Like, why would he think it's of a chicken? Or why would he think it's of a cow? And then we realize later that they're on a farm. So there's a kind of weird, almost disorientation that we feel as readers, that's kind of exhilarating, I think. It's great. Yeah, thanks. All right, well, I think that's all that we have for today. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. It's really great. As always, it's great to see you and great to hear your work. And thank you for your
Bye.
participation, your comments. Yeah, thank you. See you next week.